Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Grieving Voices. My guest today is Wayne Forrest. He is an international transformational speaker and life mastery consultant certified by the Brave Thinking Institute in LA. He grew up in the community on the east coast of Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, where he farmed for 25 years, with 15 of these from a wheelchair. And he now lives more inland with his wife, Kathy, on a small block. He has 4 children and 3 grandchildren, and he says that his sporting accident in 1995, leaving him a C5 quadriplegic, was the catalyst for his ongoing journey into personal development, which has given him the incredible life that he loves and is very grateful for. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, Victoria. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's my honor to have you. I absolutely love connecting with people in this way, one-on-one, and diving deep into grief and hearing the ins and outs of other people's stories of, in your case, transformation, which I am very excited to share with my listeners and hear more about. And so can you please take us back to that day when your life changed?
Yes, it was rather a dramatic change. I grew up in that physical world of farming right from an early age. I was on the front of my grandfather's horse, out on the farm, immersing myself into it. And then one day I was told to go to school, which I didn't really think was much chop at all. But school had sport. So, very physical background. And as I grew up, I immersed myself into those kind of businesses, even shearing sheep before my accident, and had a couple of businesses going. And I was married and had 2 beautiful twin daughters of 16 months. And I played rugby for my local club. And we had a few members away and injured that week. And I was a senior member and I'd played a lot of rugby and making some rep sides that I had captained before. So it wasn't unusual for me to be a leader of the team. And the game, it was just a typical tough physical game that we have here in New Zealand. It can be very physical. And we're losing, and we did a lovely little move on as a team with the ball, and I ended up receiving that ball and took it into contact with 2 of the opposition, and bang, I made a mistake. I ended up with my head under my shoulder, rolling over onto my neck, which dislocated my neck. I couldn't breathe. The pain was absolutely incredible. It felt like someone was sticking a hot poker right into my neck. And it took about an hour or more for the emergency helicopter to arrive. And he asked me if I'd had any pain relief. I said no. He gave me some medicine and I passed out. I woke up 5 days later in a hospital bed. Honestly, I thought I was in the middle of a dream, and I couldn't move. And I couldn't move my hands, I couldn't move my arms or my legs. And so I went from physical to not having any movement, physical movement at all. So you imagine the shock, and being a shy country boy and having to have nurses take me to the toilet, do my toileting and feed me and things like that. It was terrible. There was shame, there was a lot of emotions going around uh, inside me, and a lot of thoughts that were creating. You mentioned fear, and anxiety, and um, all those emotions.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. I don't know that anyone really can. But do you recall any conscious thoughts or like an experience of, I almost imagine it would be like this out of body, like you're looking at yourself and like do you recall that moment in that hour after until you passed out, or when you were starting to regain consciousness? Do you recall any aspect of that?
Definitely that bad dream, like feeling like you'd wake up in a cold sweat afterwards, with a shock through the system of, oh shit, I'm having a bad dream. And you wake up, oh hell no, it's not a bad dream. I'm actually in this. And you kind of wanted to wake up, from this experience and go, oh shoo, that didn't happen. But it did. And so you had that kind of feeling. Uh, It's quite interesting because I had a friend staying with me that weekend, that I'd met overseas a few years earlier, and his partner. And we were just having a quiet drink that night before, and an accident was shown on TV of a young fella who, out of 26 kids, was one of two survivors, and he broke every bone in his body,
Mm.
falling off a platform overlooking a river. And we've got a beautiful country, and it was out in the wilderness, and so about 23 odd young people died that on that platform, and this young fellow was one of the only survivors. Now, my friend visited me a couple of weeks later in hospital, and he said, can you remember the conversation that we had that night about this young fellow? And I said, no. And he said, well, you said that you would rather be dead than have every bone in your body broken. And then this happens to you the next day. Coincidence? I don't know. But synchronicities, I ended up sharing the room with the same guy.
Oh,
And that thought never occurred to me until he brought it up. It's quite funny. There's something in us that strives. Not once did I have that feeling of, oh my God, I'd rather be dead. There was life seeking through me once I had my accident. Yes, a few of those thoughts came in later down the track where you might have been going through a dark patch or a dark moment in this experience of, like, I'm talking months or even years later, because it's now 26 years since my accident. So I'm kind of talking about the first 5. And not once in that first few weeks did that thought come into my mind. It was about survival. It was about getting better. It was about, how can I, survive this? So it's really interesting how, the conscious mind can say something the day before you have an accident that you'd rather be dead, then totally forget about that and just concentrate on survival. Yeah. So interesting experience to go through.
Have you connected with that man since, or did you stay connected with him? I'm just curious.
The friend,
The man that was in that shared the hospital room with you, the gentleman that had that accident.
yeah. I haven't been in touch the last few years, but he ended up with more movement than I did,
Wow.
which is quite ironic. And I quite often, that's my sense of humor. I laugh about these things, but it's quite interesting how this journey seems to have fate or these synchronicities um, that are tied into the experience.
I absolutely believe in synchronicities for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So I imagine with your children being so young, can you speak to that
yeah,
grief that
yeah,
like the grief of the family unit moving forward, and when did it feel like it was starting to maybe lift, where you felt like
yeah.
you
That
were
was,
more in control of your mindset around it?
mate. That's a big one. The twins, being so young too, and being your first children, and having twins, you can imagine that I had no choice. I had to be a full-on dad, um, and being physical and being on the farm and outdoors. I often took one of them, especially the one that was a little bit more difficult with me. Anyone who's had twins knows that they have their turns at being difficult, um, especially when they're little. So I used to take one in particular with me out on the farm and out on jobs. So she uh, spent a lot of time with dad. And then it was a good month, nearly 3 weeks to a month before she saw me again in that hospital bed because I was so far away from home. And I remember her reaction. She saw me in the bed and packed the biggest wobbly you could and laid down on the floor of the hospital, kicking and screaming. And I knew exactly what she wanted me to do. And I know the listeners mightn't be able to see, but I've got really emotional because it still hit me right in the gut because she wanted me to pick her up and I couldn't. It wasn't until she left that room with my family that I just broke down. It really, really hit me hard. And, I know now that that's part of the lesson. It's part of growing me from inside out. But at that moment, that was gut wrenching. It really hit me home that my life has changed, because I would pick her up, I would take her away from the situation. I would have, soothed her in that way as a dad. And yeah, I couldn't. And of course, my first marriage, my wife had her own inner demons, and me not having that control, I always saw myself as a bit of a white knight on a horse. I know it's a bit egotistical before my accident, where I could control and help people. And my wife drank quite heavily. And so, all of a sudden, I couldn't control that anymore physically. And so there was a lot of that feelings of hopelessness, of vulnerability, of to the point where at times, if she'd been drinking, I felt at fear of my own life. It wasn't always the case, but I had those thoughts. So it took, to answer your question, it took probably a good 3 years to 5 years for me to start really creating that physical control again and control over my environment. And of course, in that process, our marriage didn't survive. But the relationship, I knew enough that I wanted to create a strong relationship with, and you can imagine nasty separations. She didn't really want to be separated from me, but didn't want to be with me either. So I forced the issue. So it did get a little bit messy, and sadly, the kids got caught in the middle. But they, I knew enough to make sure that I didn't blame her for the separation, and I tried to be the ground in that relationship for them. And now I've got a fantastic relationship. They're 28 years old. They've both got kids of their own, married, so, and we're very tight as a family. And as time's gone over, the relationship with my ex-wife has healed, and we've created a bridge for them, so we can, well, for me, it's so they can have a life and not worry about mum and dad being in the same room.
That's a beautiful gift to give them.
Mm.
It's a lot of ego having to be put aside and to work on daily to do that too, I imagine.
Well, ego put me in the position that broke my neck or dislocated my neck. Ego is, you can imagine coming from that farming, sport, rugby, big man, drank too much, partied too hard, background, and then having to, there was a lot of ego. Even in my healing, there was a lot of ego. And that's one thing that I've learned just in recent years with my study around these spiritual laws and principles of transformation, that recognizing that ego and the true us, the soul or the love in us. And I've done a lot of healing inward on that I'm good enough, because that same paradigm put me in this position that I made that mistake and dislocated my neck. And I believe there's no accidents.
Whew. What do you feel was the biggest catalyst in your healing? The biggest nurturer of your healing? Maybe it was a resource or a person, or what was the biggest? I think you know what I'm trying to say.
It's a great question, really great question. And there was a number of things, because it's been a journey, right? It just didn't just happen. What I look back now and with my knowledge and what I teach and learn and I practice these principles every day. And I look back now, I think it's having a vision of what would I love. And I knew I wanted to go back to the farm because that was my first love. So I accidentally created a vision, and that helped pull me into the becoming. And of course, I got better physically as well because I had a clear vision of what I wanted to be able to achieve. And when I had my accident, I couldn't move my arms and hands like I can now, right? And so I worked diligently, or hard, in other words. I don't like that word, hard. But I worked constantly at getting stronger in those early days. And because I had a clear vision, things fell into place. Like the right people. I lived in the Wops, or on a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere on the coast. Yet one of the people that has passed now, but she came and helped me with getting up and making as a carer. And she was a qualified physio before she got married to a local farmer. And she was brilliant. I put down a lot of what I got back in those early years to her because of her knowledge, her skill level, her she kept me going, in the rehab and kept me just inching forward. And I believe, that synchronicity, as we were talking about before, that was because I had a clear vision of what I wanted to do. And I achieved that. I ended up getting strong enough to drive again. Within a couple of years, that gave me freedom, that gave me independence. That also gave me the ability to get something adapted for the farm, so I could get around the farm and start managing that again. And once I achieved that, all of a sudden it was like, wow, I want another goal. And of course, be very careful, listeners, what you ask for, because I asked for something that was going to challenge me, that was going to make me stretch again. Just about the next day, I get an email from someone who had started up a pilot course of doing extreme outdoor activities for people with disabilities.
No way.
No way, all right. And I was like, oh shit, that's scary, because they were going to do abseiling, paragliding, scuba diving. And I'm like, how the beep, beep, beep am I going to do that? I'm a tetraplegic with no balance. I've got no hands. How am I going to climb a rope or get down a cliff or, be underwater and be able to do these things? And it was perfect. And so I put my name down, and and I'm a big scaredy cat. I'm not someone who really looks for danger or for things that are going to scare the bejeevers out of me. So I did it, and I learned a lot from doing that. I ended up doing water skiing in London, here in Lake, just out of London. I've done paragliding. I've done scuba diving with the sharks in the Napier Aquarium. I've paraglided off a blooming cliff, not on my own, but I've experienced all these things because of putting down that first vision. And that first vision then took me on a road of discovery. And, where my road was heading before, we don't know where that would have gone to before my accident, and where I am today. Oh my God, the polarity is so different. It's just so hard to describe because it's so different from where I was before my accident to where I am today. And I'm more confident. I'm more happier with myself. I'm healed that I'm not enough. I'm still working on it. As we know, it takes time. But I have 4 kids now. I've got 3 grandchildren. Life is good.
Life is good.
Even from a wheelchair.
Hold on 1 second. Oh my gosh, my dog is going nuts. The doorbell is ringing. And we're having this amazing conversation. 1 second, please. Okay. 1
No
second.
problem.
So sorry. Okay. Are we here? Oh, you kind of froze.
Oh, no.
There we go.
Back.
Okay. All right.
Back.
We're back. Okay. Sorry about that.
No.
Hopefully my dog is done barking. I just go ahead.
So to answer your question, and this is what I teach quite often in workshops and stuff, also, is the power of having a great vision, and then deciding for that vision. Sometimes life gets difficult, it gets really tough, and I had to keep deciding for that vision when it was tough, when I didn't feel like getting out of bed, when I wanted to just hide away from life, really. I had to decide and get up and get out and do what I had to do to help me create that next step into my vision. And the third one is sourcing that support. We're not meant to do it on our own. Quite often our ego tells us that we have to do it on our own. But, without that support of that physio that was my neighbor, or the support of my now wife, that was the girl that came and helped me on the farm, the support of the physios, the doctors, the occupational therapists, all those people, the coaches along the way. So they are the 3 secrets, or 3 main secrets, I believe, is that clear vision of what you would love, decision, and creating that support system, finding and sourcing people that have already done it or have the knowledge to help you achieve. Yes, sometimes you have to pay for that, but mate, it's well worth every cent.
I love that. That's wonderful advice for anything that people are struggling with. And there's tips there, there's advice, there's ways that others supported you. You allowed yourself to be supported. I think that's often hard for people too, is to allow themselves to be supported, like to feel like you were worthy enough, worthy of someone's time and energy and effort being put into you. And that takes a lot of inner work, I think, to even get to that point. I remember there's one podcast interview I did with someone, a griever, and she said something, and I've never forgotten it. She said, "When you lay, you decay." And you chose not to decay and get up every day, even when it was hard. And I imagine you did have days where you did just lay and you did have your pity party and feel down on yourself. And I mean, obviously you're going to have days like that, right?
Oh, totally. I was lucky. I had a family that was like, they wouldn't allow that to happen. They would like, just hurry up and get out of bed. Come on, get on with it. Typical farming folk, My
Tough
father
love.
my father came up and it was just about snowing outside, and he comes in for a cup of coffee, which he did most mornings, and he turns around to me and says, "Why haven't you moved those sheep yet?" I'm like, "Dad, it's bloody cold outside." "But they need moving." "Yeah, I'm gonna go once I warm up, okay?" It was just like, come on. They never saw me any different. You know what I mean? It was like, don't give me that crap that you're in a wheelchair. Get out there and bloody do it, will you? So I grew up in that kind of attitude, and I think that helped in those dark days, because I knew I wasn't going to get any sympathy either. It was like, come on, get out of bed, or get moving. So I forced myself to get out of bed before I was told, if that makes sense.
I think what they gave you was love, because they didn't enable you to give up on yourself, right?
Yeah, right from an early age, right from day dot, from being a young fella, was, come on, you got this. Hurry up, get out, go and do it. Rip that scab off, and
And
go
it
and live it.
served you. Yeah, because look at all the adventures and different things. You've just listening to you, you've had more like adventurous fun experiences of, the parasailing and all of that stuff. I've never done any of that. You've done more being in a wheelchair than I have as an able-bodied person. Like have fully functioning limbs, and what am I doing here? Right? That's,
Well, as a quote that I actually found earlier on, and I can't remember who said it, but it was like, do something that scares you every day. And, because we've got this fear system that is ancient. It stems back to the caveman days when there was saber-toothed tigers that were about to pounce on us. So we had to be ready to run. And we call this the flight, fright, freeze syndrome, right? And we still have that same system in our bodies, but we don't have the saber-toothed tiger now. Instead, we've got what does the neighbors say about us, or what does my family say, or that is our fear system, or what is that person in the office saying about me, or whatever.
Ego.
And yeah, the ego of that, right? That's our survival now, is worrying about what everyone else is thinking about us. And that fear isn't often real. And we've learned in society these days, I believe, to live in that fear of what's going on all the time. And we see it in the media, we see it in advertising. They know how our brain works, so they're shoving a whole lot of stress and fear to get us to do what we need to do for society and their plan, right? And we get manipulated by this idea of how our brain works through society. So, we can look at something that seems to be scary and know that, is it true? Is my life really in danger in this moment? If it's not really in danger, then why can't I step into it? And as we know, going through a trauma like this, we were talking about it earlier, there's heaps of fear of the unknown. And that's what it is. It's just fear of the unknown because we haven't experienced it before. And I think there's a video of Will Smith jumping out of a plane, and how, he talked himself just about out of it all night in a cold sweat, and then right to the next day, right up until he was about to jump out. And he wanted to hang on, he didn't want to do it, but he pushed himself through it. And as soon as he left that plane, he was calm. The fear had gone because he was in the experience. And that's when he should have had the fear, because he was falling towards the earth, right? But the fear had gone. So what does that tell us about our brain and how it works, And so we allow our dreams to pass us by because we're scared of the unknown, of stepping into that dream. And yes, our dark nights of breaking my neck, or whatever you're going through, or that disease that you've got, or that whatever, we have to face up to them. We can't hope they're going to go away. We have to actually look at it. But we can also create a real clear vision of what we would love out of this experience, and start stepping into that with that fear.
And let me ask you about that vision, because did you envision yourself doing the work that you're doing today? Because I seriously just, like, we're done, folks. Like, here's Wayne Forrest's TED Talk. I mean, this is very inspirational to me. You're very inspirational. I just feel it just out of your, just through the screen. I can just feel it in your voice, the passion. But I imagine it wasn't always that way. And so what was the vision?
Well,
I bet is it even better than you imagined?
Oh, amazing, mate. I got a brilliant life from a wheelchair. How does that work? When I had my accident, I thought my life was over, right? Because the one I knew up until that point was over physically, and so, crikey, how do I answer that question? It's a great question. The first dream was to go back to that physical life of farming. But once I achieved that, And you have to remember that farming was my love. It was really, it still is. I love farming. But once I achieved it, it was the journey of who I become that created a new vision. And then, I wasn't really clear like I am today, but that's come with the journey and understanding that if I get really clear on what I would love, then wow, those synchronicities, when you start to get in alignment with who that is that you're becoming, there's a hint in that for your listeners if they listen to that piece real carefully, right? It's who we become. We have to be who we become now, even though we haven't become it. But when we do, oh my golly gosh, those synchronicities really start to fall into place. And you end up having conversations like this one that is just so bloody good, right? And that is the synchronicity of just enjoying the journey and learning along the way by having a clear vision. Because once you achieve that vision or that dream, there's always something even greater still. Never settle. Never settle.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I think anyone listening can apply it to themselves. There's always, like, especially in grief, there's the event, this certain event. And I want my listeners, if you're listening to this, think of an event in your life where that changed you significantly. Now I want to ask you, Wayne, what would you say to version 1.0, Wayne 1.0? Knowing what you know now. And I want my listeners to think of what they would like to say to themselves, because maybe an incident just took place for someone. Maybe they just had a loss that's totally flipped their lives upside down. What do you want to say to yourself about your future if you're listening to this? And I want to ask you, Wayne, what would you say to yourself, the Wayne version 1.0, being the version you are now today?
Beautiful question. And what comes to me is with a loving heart and love, I would give myself a huge hug and say, you've got this. You've got this. Each one of us has the same power that's breathing us. I don't care what you think or what you're feeling. I know you've got this.
I think this is the most I've ever cried. Wipe tears away during a podcast interview. Oh, it says so much about your heart. Thank you so much for sharing. What has your grief taught you?
To love myself more. That grief is only there because there's a part of you that that is hurt. No one else has hurt you. It comes from a deep, painful scar of a young mind or young experience. In other words, we talk about the child, in us. That pain comes from an experience that we've had. And if you give that part of yourself more love, you will start to heal that grief.
Do you still have bad days?
Oh, totally, man. I'm human. You know, I made a joke of that with a talk that I did a couple of days ago that, you know, raise your hand if you've had a challenge in life, if you've had a bad day in life. Half the crowd put their hand up, and I asked them, are you human? Raise your hand. Yeah, I knew there was a few that weren't from this world, right? If you're human, you're going to have some bad days. It's part of it. It's not meant to be clean, clinical. It's meant to be messy. Life's meant to be messy. It's you know, we're all meant to do it messy. That's the way we learn. You know, we're all meant to fail. It's part of the process. You learn a lot from failure. You don't learn a lot from success. It's the failures. You ask anybody that's had incredible success in life, they've learned from their failures. And they've taken it on and keep failing until they've got it right. And it's the same with trauma. It's going to be messy. Just step into it. Step into that mess. Face up to it. Keep stepping into that unknown. Keep stepping into it because you've got a vision of heal. Heal. That should be your vision of healing. What would that look like? What would that love look like for you? Create that strong, powerful vision and step into it, the unknown. Do it messy, do it ugly, do it with tears, do it with laughter, do it with crying, do it with yelling, do it with F you, but do it.
So what does your work look like today?
Mate, this is what I teach. I love it. There's nothing better than helping people heal and connect to their true self. I believe that each one of us is born genius. Each one of us has a skill set, something to give to this experience. And what I do is I help people get in touch and alignment with that and start living into that and create a journey of a life that they can look back on and go, God, I love my life. God, thank God for this journey.
Bless it, right? Bless the
That's
journey.
it. Yeah.
What gives you the most joy and hope for your future?
The understanding now and that I have this incredible potential and possibility. I've got an incredible potential, just like each soul walking this earth. I've got incredible potential. That excites me because, mate, there's a possibility of anything could happen.
What does your vision look like now for the future? Do you want to share a goal of yours?
Yeah. Well, the latest one was the TEDx talk, and that was last year. This goal is to speak my truth to more people, you know, and I don't mind sharing this, but I want to speak to thousands of people at one time. You know, I want people to hear the message of my truth, of that you all have that same potential and possibility of having lives that you love. So I want to spread that message as big and wide as far. And I believe it's one that's needed in this very crazy environment of fear leading us. I want people to create lives they love, because I think that will help humanity go in a direction that we all want.
I have a question for you, and I believe I already know the answer, but I want to hear how you'll answer it. If I had a magic wand and I can reverse that day, and that day would have happened like any other day, would you want me to reverse that day, to change what happened?
The ego does. With the level of awareness I have now, I know that it's even possible today for me to create that possibility, right? We know in quantum physics it's possible. So to answer your question, I wouldn't want to give up what I've learned, right? Because I know that now it's possible that I can actually have that miracle, or have that magic wand, as you said.
Oh, and look at me putting limitations on you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So
what me asking you does, right?
well, yeah, but it's also given me the awareness that, well, no, actually, I don't need that limitation, So you can't put any limitation on me.
That's true.
That's what I mean, right? So it's not about the question or that limitation, because none of us we're only limited by the way we think. And I know there's more in that, and there's probably a whole new podcast for that subject. But I know that I have that awareness of that consciousness now, that I'm only limited by the possibility that I think. So if I expand that thinking and that possibility, then there's so much more potential.
I
Right?
just want to give people this thought to think about this. You don't have to have a tragic accident, right? To have a life that you love, to have become the best version of yourself, to step into fear and to step into failure and to do all the things and accomplish all the things that you have because of that accident. That didn't have to happen for you to be who you are today, but it did.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than laying and decaying, you've gotten up and transformed your life in spite of it, despite of it, despite, I don't know. You get what I'm saying. But yeah, so what are your closing thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's beautiful. You did right. Take on what you've heard today and live it. And to do that, my closing thoughts would be, look for the magic in life. Stay curious. Question every belief, because our belief system is what is limiting us in our potential, right? Belief is a crazy thing. It separates as well. So, question any belief, because if you question your beliefs, you're going to find your truth.
Do you have a resource that you could share and leave people with today?
Well, I've got a Facebook group, private group that I've created just recently, and I've got a few challenges happening in that. I've got one coming up, but that depends when this is aired. But you can always join that. It's called Turning Disability into a Life of Possibility. And reach out on Facebook, Wayne Forrest, Instagram, Wayne Forrest NZ. Look, you know, on most, I've been growing my platforms, but I'm around, and I'm sure that Victoria will put a link in the bio.
Yeah, all the show notes I'll have in the show notes, I'll have all your links. But I do want to mention, do you still have the resource on your website, the Dream Life Blueprint?
Yes, I do. That's also another result. Another one. It's a 15-minute recording where I recommend, you know, just a couple of times a day, morning and night. It's a fantastic. It's a beautiful little. If you like my voice, well, you know, it's a meditation of sorts, but it's got the three elements, and that's the vision, and that forgiveness, and that decision.
I love it. Anything else you would like to share?
No, mate. I think we've given so much, but just know that you have genius in you, and step into the unknown.
Amen. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. You've inspired me. You've left me better than I was before I sat in this chair. So thank you.
Pleasure.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.
Thank you. Bye.